Voxtur this morning announced that it is acquiring Blue Water Financial Technologies. So I'm chatting with Colin to talk about the deal, what he thinks about it, and even understanding the pricing, because it's a little confusing in the press release. So Colin, thanks for joining me.
Hey, my pleasure. How are you doing?
Thanks. So let's talk about first the pricing. It's a little confusing because we have USD, CAD. Can we walk through this first?
Yeah, sure, if you want to. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I always feel like people know the price of everything and the value of nothing half the time when it comes to these acquisitions. I remember when the ANOW acquisition was made, everyone poo-pooed it as being massively overvalued. And then the first contract that they win, made it all of a sudden look like absolutely dirt cheap. So we can dive into the financials of it. It's not rocket science. But yeah.
But what I'm seeing from the press release is that the purchase price is 101 million USD,
Yep.
and then they are taking on 30 million of debt USD.
Yep.
So if we take the calculation of 101 minus 30, so the seller is taking 71 million USD, right? The sellers in shares. So if we divide it by, because there's 101 million shares plus 69 million shares, so 170. So if we take that 71 million times 170, that's 42 cents USD. And if we convert it to Canadian, that's about 54 cents Canadian. So that's the price that is being done at.
Yeah, I don't think that's entirely accurate. The only reason I say it, I mean, yes, that's correct. That's assuming all of the shares pay out. I don't know if there's any performance issues on there. In satisfaction of certain obligations of Blue Water under long-term incentive plans adopted by Blue Water in 2019 and 2022. Yeah, so there's always some performance on these things. Yes. So if all things are come to fruition and they pay out all those shares, that is the price. Whatever.
So that's just to get this out of the way, that's a 30% dilution. And so now, let's talk about what you think about it, how significant it is. Let's get into that we have the pricing out of the way.
I think that, listen, many times you do the right deal doesn't always come at the right time. And so you get the deal done, I think this is a significant win for the this is a significant win. I think this is probably one of the most important acquisitions ever in this space. And I think when you take all of the different parts, so I think if you take, in terms of what the two companies bring to each other, in terms of the data that can be integrated into the Blue Water technologies, also, just the MSAs, master service agreements, a company like Blue Water Technology from a standing start to get the number of MSAs that they have already would just be a Herculean task. It would take forever. They would need to ramp up the cost, the timing, the going to market strategy there's just so many things for them why this deal makes sense. And for Voxtur, this makes massive sense too. I think this is going to have very much the same color and similarities to the ANOW acquisition. I think when the and in many ways, I actually think it's much more significant listen, not in many ways, in every single way. The only similarity is I'm just regarding to, the initial price sticker shock that people are going to have vis-a-vis A now. They said, oh, that was $23 million, and you bought a company that had barely $1 million in revenue in their first contract, through not too much sleuthing, is well over $10 million worth of revenue. So, you basically Gary paid, or Voxtur paid, 2.5 times revenue based on the first contract. So I don't think, I don't know what the numbers are. They haven't disclosed what the numbers are. I had some chat with Gary this morning after this press release. I think the cross-selling capabilities between the two platforms is going to be absolutely
what does
massive.
Can you explain it to a 11-year-old? What do they do? What does Blue Water do?
Well, when you're buying and selling, so it's a fairly well-known fact that the buying and selling of mortgages is predominantly driven by Excel spreadsheets, and it's incredibly laborious. The information's not very good. There's many data points. It's very difficult to analyze a large portfolio. So if you're buying a big block of mortgages, the amount of effort that has to be done in order to analyze it is problematic. And then pricing it, and then putting in the risk and all the other stuff. So in terms of the product being dialed in for the capital market users, has already been proven to be an excellent product. And so they're able to buy and sell their platform is designed for the capital markets for buying and selling of large blocks of portfolios and portfolios of mortgages. And so doing all the analytics, all the risk analytics, pricing it, Blue Water has. What they don't have are the MSAs with all the other companies. What they also don't have is the ability to suck in all the data that Voxtur has. And so, and I'm simplifying, and I'm probably getting a few things wrong around the edges, but I'm not fully awake. So, but that, I would just distill it down to they're a capital markets platform that is going to increase the efficiencies of the buying and selling of large mortgage portfolios for secondary buyers. And with the MSAs and the data that Voxtur has, and the deep know-how of Blue Water financial technologies, I think what you're going to look at is a serious category killer that will propagate through the capital markets. And the number of portfolio of mortgages that are bought and sold and all that type of stuff is massive. And so, and they're big dollar amounts. And, I think this could have revenues easily in the hundreds of millions, if not higher. And, I wouldn't be surprised if they would easily have numbers in the billions when it's fully deployed. And then the cross-selling capability will be in the hundreds of millions. And I'm talking about hundreds of millions in the net income, not in top-line revenue. So I also believe that this starts to throw cash to the bottom line post-acquisition, which is a very important element. And I just think it makes the ability to cross-sell the offerings from Voxtur to all of the different companies they already have MSAs with, but don't necessarily have big share of wallet, or I think that will also increase. So, maybe we should do this on another call, but, I've been listening to a lot of the other companies in the same space. When you listen to their conference calls and their earnings calls, and you see where their pain points are and where they're looking to grow, We should do an analysis of that together. It'd be kind of interesting. But, I'm listening to all these different companies and where their pain points are. And, none of them are really pivoting or making real moves like this. Like this is a huge deal. Like this is integrating, as I mentioned to someone on Twitter once, the guy was like, why don't we go after MLS stuff? And I'm like, well, MLS is like a store, and, an oversimplification. Voxtur is the data, is the transaction rails, like a Visa or a MasterCard or something like that. And this is not only like Visa and MasterCard, it's then as if you were selling, if you wanted to offload part of your balance sheet, the debts that are on those cards or the debts that are in the mortgage, selling that into the secondary market and allowing people to transact directly from the data sets that we have. I mean, this is a hugely important migration of that data into the secondary market and making it, I won't say near instantaneous because it'll have a little bit of rollout, but eventually it'll be near instantaneous, and that'll have absolutely Herculean, massive implications for the secondary market. And how, I mean, if you see how arcane mortgages, when they're selling them, it's absolutely unbelievable how manual a process it is right now, and the amount of risk that people are taking selling those things and buying them.
Yeah, so this is the transition into the secondary mortgage market, which both Gary and Jim alluded to in the past.
Yeah, and I mean they're I mean they've alluded to it. There's benefits, like, so things like with the AOL. Everyone was saying, oh, anybody can do an AOL. And as I'd said, well, anyone can do an AOL. Any lawyer could have done an AOL. And there's been edge cases for AOL for many years. And in fact, Freddie, I think was 3 years ago, allowed for AOL in edge cases. The problem was having the scalability and the platform for that. For there's basically the true digitization of the AOL, and then for it to be tracked and appended to a mortgage and the house, and having that data set fly around in the secondary market. Well, you can imagine with something like this, Blue Water Financial Technologies, that now you could take any of those AOLs and then port it directly into the trading platform, and having that data set fly with all those that portfolio of mortgages. So I mean the cross selling of this stuff is going to be huge. It's mind boggling in my mind's eye. I don't think I could be as hyperbolic as I could be. Way more hyperbolic, and it would still probably not be as impact. I still would undersell the impact of what I think this is going to do. And sometimes the it takes a little while to really digest all of the implications, because the devil and God is in the details, right? And finding some of these things and really understanding, like really stewing in and understanding what the implications are, I think it's going to be bigger than we think. But it is a huge thing. It's funny, I'm getting all these messages through Twitter and whatnot. Oh, is it expensive? I don't think this is expensive. Sometimes when you're buying the right company and it's giving you massive scale, I think they're going to pay back this whole thing cash on cash in under 18 months. That's what I think. And that's from the cross-selling and all the other elements. And so, I think that's right. 18 months. So I think, my back of the envelope, not fully awake. I think they could do 70 million net next year from this. And so add another 6 months on top of that, that's another 35. That's 105 USD. And I'm talking in USD dollars. That I think you could have this thing paid for cash on cash in 18 months. And so, and let's also be clear, they have I think it's a venture partner, it's either private equity, Rice Partners or whatever, is selling this and taking the deal. So you have a very sophisticated seller from either venture or private equity. You have a bank that underwrote this to provide the additional monies. And, you know, I think if you look at this, you know, these are not people running around, these are not people running around making ad hoc knee-jerk decisions. These are large dollar amounts for anybody. You have a sophisticated seller, you have a sophisticated buyer, you have a sophisticated lender, and no one's going to sit there and let Voxtur off the chain and just go running willy-nilly, running around and doing stuff. And people aren't going to take paper in a company if they don't think that there's a net value to it, and that the sum is greater than the parts. So listen, I'm just some asshole sitting in downtown Toronto chatting about this with some other guy in Indiana. But if you look at, like, I always amazed that people just don't look at the information that's out there. These are very sophisticated partners at the table playing this game. So from my mind's eye, this is a very, very well considered, thought out, priced properly, and is priced in the context of the market. Listen, if it was done last year, it would have done it at a different price, I'm certain, but it would have been done on a different price for both the buyer and the seller, right? I mean, these things are in context. So if we did it at a higher price, but we paid a higher price, I mean, net, you come out to the same thing. So from my mind's eye, this is a exceptionally good deal. You know, I always invoke, you know, certain players in my life, you know, the Art Meshers of the world, who are these great builders of very large scalable businesses, and really understands, you know, he always uses the term federations, or, you know, networked federations of businesses, or networks, federated networks. And he, you know, he thinks in a very large scalable way. And, you know, he, you know, built Descartes. And then I have my buddy Sheldon, and Sheldon is, you know, the guy who can buy incredibly large businesses that have very, very small gross margins. And he knows how to fly basically an F-18 1 inch above the ground, and then knows how to get it to 2 inches off the ground, you know, through cost savings, increased efficiencies and whatnot. And so those two have been very influential in the way I look at the marketplace. Gary tends very much towards an Art Mesher style of really understanding federated and what the cost synergies and business synergies are. And I hate that word synergies, but every once in a while synergies is the right word. And in this instance, it really is the right word. Gary is a stone cold genius. You know, I've said this many times. I don't think people, you know, it's unfortunate the market is so far behind where Gary is and what he's doing with this business. But I mean, people say this is expensive. I think this is dirt cheap, and that it's a fair price for both sides, because, you know, 6 months ago, they could have sold for a higher price, and we could have bought. We would have bought it at a higher price, even if our share price was higher. So I think relatively, these are exactly the right price going in together. And I think both parties, or if you want to look at it in three parties, Voxtur is going to do well, and that includes the shareholders. So that's two parties, and the acquired group is going to do well, and I think BMO is going to do well. So all in all, I think this is an exceptionally well thought out, well considered, and incredibly powerful acquisition. And that the two are not, I don't think this is like 1 + 1 = 3. I think this is 1 + 1 = like 10,000. Like, this is a shockingly good deal.
All right, Colin. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much. Hope it helps.